and the author of that little narrative, Douglas, is still with us. And we've been joined by the political editor of the New Statesman, Mehdi Hasan. You two have crossed swords on this issue before.
Have we?
Publicly, hotly. The thing is, the rhetoric is heated. Let me just throw some of it at you immediately, Mehdi. So Douglas says, discussing multiculturalism, it means that if you were a white English girl born into a white English family and your family decided to marry you against your will to a randy old pervert, the state would intervene. But if you had the misfortune to be born into an Asian background family and the same happened, the state would look the other way. Is he not even allowed to say those things?
Of course he is. Who said he wasn't? I mean, there's a lot of straw men in this debate. No one says Douglas is not allowed to express his view. In fact, the dominant narrative right now is anti-multiculturalism. In fact, I'm the minority in a different sense, not Douglas in terms of the debate. And of course, no one says it's racist to be opposed to multiculturalism. Of course not. What I would say on that specific issue that you raise, for example, forced marriage.
I would have to say, though, that although Mehdi Hasan in this interview is basically saying that nobody is calling anybody a racist for being a multiculturalist or against multiculturalism, when you hear Mehdi Hasan talk on his own shows, when he's not on these shows, when he's not debating, he always intimates that this is coming from, you know, the white population. This is coming from the white working class. You know, this is coming from, you know, the interior, you know, this is coming from, you know, like flyover country, okay? So he always does that. So when he's talking about straw manning over here, he's trying to portray himself as, oh, yeah, you know what? He can be you can be anti-multiculturalism. No, we're not going to call you a bigot, a bigot. No, we're not going to call you a racist. All the while, you know, twisting up in pretzels and giving you the wink-wink. Anyways, let's continue.
Is just not true. The state doesn't look the other way. The Foreign Office and the Home Office have a unit that goes out to Pakistan to rescue British girls who've been sent out there. And no supporter of multiculturalism, and I would count myself as one, defends forced marriages on multicultural grounds. So it's the whole thing is a straw man argument.
And that is an accusation levelled at many of those who argue from your standpoint that you paint with far too broad a brush. For example, you talk about immigrants despising the country they live in. How many immigrants despise the country they live in?
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be a very large percentage for it to cause huge problems, as we learned in 2005, to our great cost. First of all, I don't agree that
they weren't immigrants.
No. I'm saying people who come to this country and who are then taught and acquire a sense of hatred towards this country. First, I mean, what we're seeing in Britain is a form of reverse assimilation. People are less integrated this generation than their parents and grandparents because there is less desire to actually get involved in the country they're in. And another thing, this isn't a straw man argument about the forced marriage issue because, yes, it's true the FCO has now got a forced marriage unit. It was very late in coming. And the phenomenon of girls of Asian background being married off had been going on for decades until government got involved.
No one's denying that, but it wasn't going on because of multiculturalism.
I don't want to get hung up on forced marriages because we could talk about it. We're talking about the broader.
Yeah. Now, Douglas brings up a great point. He said this has been going on for decades. And why did they need to form this FCO, this government agency that's going to other countries? And like he said, specifically, they're going out to Pakistan to rescue British girls born in Britain that were now basically sent back over to Pakistan into the villages to get married against their will. And so Mehdi goes, oh, yeah, it was there before, but it's not happening now, you know. But why? For decades it was going on. And yes, the British government looked the other way. Why? Not because of economic reasons, not because of cultural reasons. No, they looked away because they felt, well, it was part of culture. It was the British government looking at it and said, so what? They're not white girls. They're not our daughters. They're brown girls. They're from another community, from another ethnicity. So what? Even though they're born in British. So the British government was complicit in this as well, folks. And Douglas should know, and like Douglas is saying, he said the British government was complicit. If this was happening with white girls being married off and being carted off to some, let's say, a white country, you know, going back to, let's say if they were going back to Czechoslovakia or one of the Scandinavian countries, and you found out that British-born white girls were being sent back to Sweden or sent back to Denmark or Finland or Norway to be married against their will underage, Do you think the British government would have just let that go? No. They were being racist at that time. They were, and another thing, maybe they didn't want to look like if this is going to be the excuse. Oh, we didn't want to seem like we were racist. We didn't want to say we're meddling in somebody else's culture. That's not the culture that Britain wants to be known for. When you're sending off underage girls, British-born girls, to other countries to get married against their will. I don't think anybody wants that.
Aspect of multiculturalism.
But Douglas is just wrong to say that a younger generation is not as integrated.
But you can't have it both ways, because on the one hand, you have said yourself that it alienates, particularly the British Muslim community, when people paint in the brushstrokes that Douglas is using. So you talk about the alienation, yet when he talks about the alienation, you say it's not true.
That's apples and oranges is different. I mean, I'm talking
apples
about
and
alienation
oranges
that we're creating right now. I'm not talking about the last 40 years, of which Douglas is basically indicting 40 years of integration
but where
of
are
immigrants.
we now? Where are we now, do you think? Where are we now?
Well, let me just take one poll, to bring some facts into the debate. In 2009, Gallup did extensive polling of Muslim communities across Europe. They found that British Muslims were more likely to identify with Britain than non-Muslim Britons, 77% to 50%. They found that British Muslims were more keen on living in mixed areas than segregated areas than non-Muslim Britons, 68% to 57%. So I don't buy this caricature.
So if that's the case, then what I would like to ask, what is stopping them? Is it economics? When these migrants, when these refugees, asylum seekers, and immigrants that are coming legally and those that are coming illegally, why do they congregate to those areas? You know why? Because most of them they're coming here uneducated to the shores of England. They're not coming there as doctors, scientists, teachers, engineers, lawyers. They're not. They're coming as basically I would say, lower class, lower middle class, and even lower. Yes, you have some that are coming at the professional level, some that are coming at the upper class levels or even higher, but they're not the ones that are going to Leeds and Birmingham and going into these, ghettos that are mostly 30, 40, 50, 60%, Muslim or immigrant populations. That's not where the upper society that is migrating from these other countries are going to know. They're going into those enclaves where if there's a bunch of people that are from Bangladesh, that's where they're going. There's a bunch of people from Pakistan that are in a community, that's where they're going. Little India, little Pakistan, that's where they're going, to those communities and getting whatever work they can get, wherever they can live, apartments, whatever it is. Why aren't they moving out into the suburbs, into the really nice areas of London, the really nice areas of England, the posh areas, so to speak? Economics, but also because of who is coming.
From the right, which says all young Muslims are out to blow stuff up and don't like living here.
And it was
not
very
me,
interesting.
not anyone I know, none of my friends.
Andrew raised a very interesting point. I mean, you were describing the bombers as immigrants. At what point do people cease to be immigrants in this country and become, in your mind, nationals or British or part of the landscape?
As a friend of mine who immigrated here himself says, the point where you become British is the period where you realise you don't get any extra rights than anyone else, any extra sensitivities than anyone else, any extra inducements than anyone else.
You get respect for your culture, Douglas.
All you get is to put up with the same crap the rest of us get to put up with. That's the deal. No extra things. And the thing is that at the moment, the dominant narrative of British life has become lost. And this is what I was trying to say in the film, is that everyone can, as it were, argue their rights, their background, their culture, other than British rights, British culture, British norms. I think it makes it a lot easier to integrate people if you know what you're integrating into.
You imply there's a difference between British culture and kind of minority rights. They're not. No. It's all one and the same thing. We come together.
But sometimes they run very much
evolves.
You two tend to
evolves.
joust frequently, but I'm very keen to just unpick some of this. At the last election, even the Labour Party held up their hands and they said, you know what, we made white working class people feel alienated, we drove them, we herded them into the hands of extremists.
Well, as we know, the Labour Party can be wrong on a lot of things.
So they were wrong about that?
Well, one of the people who was saying that, of course, was then disqualified from his seat for race baiting in Oldham. So I'm not going to take lessons from Phil Willis on what integration looks like. But just on the specific one of terrorism.
The message. I want to know about the message. You think that message was wrong?
I think there is an issue with working class communities, white working class communities, insecurity. I think that's an economic issue. To pretend it's about language or forced marriages or these issues is rubbish.
It's about...
He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. I really have to, really have to say something with Mehdi Hasan over here. He's saying it's all economics in the middle class or lower middle class areas, the white working class areas. It's just a matter of economics. If they were just making more money, this wouldn't be a problem. No, because they are seeing that that as the immigrants move in, as the refugees move in, what starts to happen is that they've basically got to take a backseat with their own culture, their own British culture, whatever you want to call it, white European culture, has to take a back seat and to say, oh, we have to be more. Yes, you've got to be accepting, but not at the loss when you're looking at your own culture. When laws are being broken or laws are being made and saying, oh, we have to deal with, we're going to have special laws or different laws for these British citizens that are white and treat you differently. And then we're going to allow the non-white citizens that are coming, the non-whites who are in Britain, the recent immigrants, the recent asylees, recent, whether they're illegal or legal immigrants, we're going to have different laws for you because your cultures are different. And we're going to have multiculturalism. And we're going to try, and like you said, that failed on a gigantic scale in Britain, trying to be multicultural, trying to be, everything to everybody. And in that sense and period, what happens is British cultures, British values are completely lost. And that's what makes those white working class people feel alienated. That's nothing, economics is part of it. But don't go around thinking that it's not the multicultural aspect and the dumping and the huge influx at such a fast pace that's changing everything around them. People going, what the hell is going on over here?
I've got to address this terrorism point. Sorry, the 7-7 bombers. Very briefly, you've had a long film. The 7-7 bombers, let me just make a very specific point, could speak English, married of their own accord, played cricket. They were not in forced marriages or
I have to let Douglas Murray have a final word on this.
This is the tragedy, is that there are people in this country who do not feel loyalty to this country, who do not feel they have to have any loyalty to this country. And we saw there one of the end points it can reach.
What Mehdi is saying, and he made that point, is that those bombers in England, they were British born, but they had an ethnic background, they had an immigrant background, and somehow, they become radicalized to the point where they become anti-British, or that they needed to do something to harm their own country. So what was that? Was that economics? Was it that they weren't just making enough money, so they decided to blow something up? No, it was something cultural. It was something was missing that they weren't able to fully integrate. Yes, they were born British on British soil and had a British passport, British citizenship, but they didn't integrate into the society. Okay, they played cricket, but I wonder, who were they playing cricket with? Was it with white British or other British people? Or was it just mainly with their own immigrant population? Where did they live? Where did they try to assimilate? Was it within Britain proper, the Britain proper population? Or a more, let's say, a different diverse population than the Asian population where they were growing up? Where did they go to schools? Were they integrated schools? Were they diverse schools? Or were they mostly Asian immigrant schools where the population of immigrants were there? What were their parents teaching? What were their parents doing? That's what I'd like to know. That's where we have to go with these questions, is that what was it that made these British-born children of immigrant families, what made them decide to become anti-British, to go against Britain, to harm Britain and its own people and its own citizens? Anyways, folks, we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your host, Dr. Nasir. If you haven't done so already and we've earned your subscription, you love our content, we certainly hope you subscribe to the channel and share it with others. Take a look at our other video links above and below. My final thought, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.